Well, what is up, guys? Hopefully hopefully you've had a good day. So, thought I would do a sort of a part two to the video I did this morning. So I'm sure some of you guys will have seen the video I did. I was talking more about the inghams. I was talking more specifically Chris and the fact that every time someone posts a negative comment, he retaliates by calling that person a clown. Now, at the end of the day, when you see Chris do things like that, it's kind of hilarious because he's just making himself look so incredibly kind of immature and even somewhat childish by choosing to, respond to negative comments in that way. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't have that right to retaliate to negative comments and obviously defend themselves. They have every right to do. They do have every right to do that if they choose to. If that's what they choose to do. But when Chris tries to defend himself, or tries to retaliate to negative comments, he just makes himself look incredibly childish and immature by choosing to call people clowns. Because that's what he does. Now, I think at the end of the day, it's just there's no need for it at the end of the day. There's no need for him to call people clowns every time they post a negative comment. There's just no reason for that at the end of the day. I mean, there are better ways to respond or to retaliate to negative comments that don't resort to using insults every single day. I mean, he tries to act like the big man, calling people clowns and God knows what. But you think about it, right? He wouldn't have the balls to say that to somebody when out in public. He'd be too scared. We all know for a fact that he'd be too scared to call somebody a clown if he was out in public. And I think he knows that. I think he knows that he'd be too scared to call somebody a clown out in public. But when it comes on the YouTube comments, he's trying to act like the big man calling people clowns. He's just making himself look incredibly childish and immature. Because let's face it, calling people clowns is quite an immature and childish way to respond to negative comments or to retaliate to negative comments. And there are ways to retaliate to negative comments that aren't so childish or immature. And it's just hilarious because at the end of the day, it's he's the biggest, he has to cheat all other people clowns when he's the biggest clown running in. It's they want people to respect them, right? But it's why should people respect them when all he does is call people clowns every time they post a negative comment? I don't see how that warrants them being given respect. As I said, why should people give them respect and give them any sort of respect when all Chris does every time someone posts a negative comment is respond to that comment by calling somebody a clown, which is, as I said, incredibly childish and immature. And he's supposed to be an adult, he acts like a big kid when the way he responds to negative comments. I call out a lot of other family vlogging channels, right? And that's what I do. But at least a lot of these other family vloggers don't really respond to negative comments in such a childish and mature way like Chris does. I mean, how do people not see that as childish and immature? Because that's basically what it is. But, the fact that he thinks it's acceptable to keep responding to retaliating to negative comments like that is just completely unbelievable. And I only hope that one day he lives to regret it. I hope one day somebody makes him regret holding people clowns. And I think one day he will be made to regret it. You know, he will be made to, he'll call somebody a clown and it won't really end well for him. You know, I think, you know, when he calls people clowns, I think that he's not really expecting people to retaliate. But when he's calling people clowns, of course people are gonna retaliate. And they're gonna bite back at him because, you know, people ain't gonna take kindly to comments like that. You know, it's like there's just no need for it. Like, there's no need for him to be constantly responding to negative comments by calling people clowns. You know, and this is directly aimed at Chris because Sarah doesn't really do that. Sarah, you know, it's like, how can I call Sarah out for this when she doesn't really do this? She doesn't really call people clowns. It's more Chris that seems to always be doing that. You know, I mean, what does he think? He's some kind of big man calling people clowns? He's making himself, you know, to be honest, he needs to realise that he's making himself look incredibly immature and childish by choosing to respond to negative comments in that way. Like, as I said, I'm not saying that they're not allowed to retaliate to negative comments and they're not allowed to defend themselves. I'm in no way saying that. But I'm saying that he doesn't need to keep calling people clowns every time he responds to negative comments, which is what he does. And it's kind of gotten incredibly boring now, the fact that every time someone posts a negative comment, you've got Dear Darling Chris jumping on and calling people clowns. You know, he needs to come up with a new insult because that insult has just gotten incredibly boring. You know, that insult is so last year. You know, at least come up with an insult that isn't actually so incredibly stale. Which at this point, that whole clown insult is just, it has gotten incredibly stale. You know, and he just makes himself look so shameful the way that he retaliates to negative comments. There's no need for him to retaliate to negative comments calling people clowns. There's not many people that do that. Because that is quite, you know, as people know, that's quite childish and immature. You know, you would expect that sort of thing from a 5-year-old, not a man who's in his 40s. You wouldn't really expect a man in his 40s to be responding to negative comments in that way, in such a childish and immature way. And I'm not going to apologise for saying this, but it's just really had to be said. I mean, I know that there are people out there who will say that Chris has every right to call people clowns. But the truth of the matter is he has no fucking right whatsoever to be calling people clowns. It's like, what right does he actually have to be calling people clowns? He doesn't have that right to be calling. Yeah, he has that right to be defending himself. He has that right to retaliate, but he doesn't have the right to be calling people clowns. He absolutely doesn't have the right to do that. And he never will have the right to call people clowns. He's the biggest clown of them all. So the fact that he calls other people clowns is actually quite hilarious, considering he's basically the biggest clown of them all. No word of a lie. And I know that people will come back and will basically be wanted to kill me for saying that, but it just had to be said. And it's not something I feel bad for saying, because someone had to say it. Someone had to say that it's, you know, that the way that he responds to negative comments or retaliates to negative comments is completely unacceptable. You know, and it is very, very childish and immature. And there's nothing good to say about it. Like, he needs to come up with something new instead of calling people clowns. You know, come up with something that he had an insult that he hasn't used 100 times before. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know, it's like, just because someone posts a negative comment doesn't mean they deserve to be called a clown. I mean, what, people are a clown because they don't respect what they do. You know, at the end of the day, it's ridiculous. I mean, that's a great way to earn respect, isn't it, by calling people clowns. when he's doing things like that, why the fuck would anyone want to give them any respect? Or why the fuck would anyone show them any respect? When he thinks it's appropriate to respond to negative comments like that, calling people clowns. Like, they don't encourage people to give them respect. People ain't gonna give them respect when they're doing things like that, which they have no right to, and at the end of the day, he has no right to say things like that. In a way, I would go as far as to say that it is probably bullying. Calling people clowns and things like that, that is basically bullying. So that makes him just as bad as the people that are, if not worse, than the people that are actually posting negative comments. You know, I wouldn't say that the people who are posting negative comments are the bullies. I would say it's Chris who is the bully, is he's the one that's calling people clowns. Every time someone posts a negative comment. So that makes him more, basically to me, that makes him more of a bully than it does anyone else. I have no idea what else to say. You know, the guy, he just needs to grow up and come up with a response that isn't so flipping immature and so childish, which is basically what that insult is. To call someone a clown is just incredibly, to respond to retaliate to a negative comment by calling somebody a clown is just incredibly childish and incredibly immature. And I honestly don't know what else to say. I feel like I've said everything I needed to say, really. So I hope you've enjoyed this video anyway, and I'll see you guys for another one tomorrow. Bye bye.